Hey, John, what's going
Hey
on?
man, what's going on? So good to see you, Roosevelt. Seems like it's been a while.
Yeah, man, it's becoming far and in between that we get to talk to each other on a regular basis, but we have a lot going on. So hey, the new year, some new issues happening. So it is what
Yeah,
it is.
I'm excited about this year in Allendale. We've got a lot going on. We talked about that on another podcast, but man, it's an exciting time, and I'm super stoked for our guest this week. Let's bring her on.
Yeah, I have
She's
told her
great.
so
I don't
many
know how
times.
I stumbled into this group that she's running, but it's the most amazing group that I've ever been a part of. So when the meeting starts and ends on time, and then once it's over, she's got notes in your inbox before you get a chance to check it. That gives you a rundown of what all was said. So
It could be that Buckeye education that she has, because this woman is well educated. She's been to Ohio State. She's been to Duke. She's down in Tulane right now studying her medical. She's been a part of Moms on Demand, the Sierra Club. I mean, and people, she's still a young lady, right? She's still a young lady, right? And she has so much going on, and it's very inspirational. That's why we wanted to have her on, Miss Angelle Bradford. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank y'all so much. I'm good. I'm good. I think, yeah, maybe a little OSU education, but also being from Louisiana, that makes you stronger, in and of itself. So yeah, but thank you for having me.
No problem. We are, like I said, we me and John, and a lot of people that I know that have met you, are very you leave a very good impression on us, right? Because you're very active. You're out there. You're advocating for things that you believe are important. And I tell my daughter all the time, if you think it's important and you spend time on it, if it's important to you, put time into it and make and show people how important it is to you. And you are putting that in action. I know your parents are proud of you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure me and my sister collectively drive them crazy, but I do think at the end of the day, they are proud. Yes.
Oh, come on now. Yeah, as a parent, our kids drive us crazy, but I'd rather my kids drive me crazy than anybody else, right? I can deal with that. So, and John is working with you on he's been to a couple of meetings, and he's talked about you a lot, right? And how impressed he is of you. Ain't that right, John?
yeah, I first met her on Moms Demand Action, and I'm not a mom, but I was a part of a group in Shreveport that was forming around Moms Demand Action during a previous time in politics when I was representing a candidate who was endorsed by Moms Demand Action, and I was impressed that Angelle would drive up here to Shreveport from Baton Rouge just to meet with us, and then she was gone. She'd have another meeting somewhere else, and she was gone. But then how did I guess maybe Four Corners Coalition, as the groups in Louisiana that are resisting highways, got together, and Lafayette is a strong group, Y49, and Shreveport with Allendale Strong, Monroe, and of course Amy Stelly and her group in New Orleans, a very powerful bunch. And so, not sure how I got involved with Sierra Club, but I'm so glad that I am, because Angelle runs a great meeting of a group of people that are looking at transportation. Why don't you talk, Angelle? Tell us about your latest endeavor and what we've been working on with the Sierra Club group.
Yeah. I mean, I will say the blessing of getting older and like recognizing finite time and being able to really specialize their time is kind of the like product that led to or the impetus that led to the transit equity team of just like, what can we do to maximize people's time? Almost all of us are either like full-time in school, full-time workers or parents. And so the Sierra Club Delta chapter is the Louisiana chapter of the Sierra Club. And it's the oldest conservation organization in the country, but also has expanded to include environmental justice and climate change fights. And that's kind of our bread and butter now. And the Delta chapter is so used to lawsuits and like fighting the power in that way that it was like, okay, we also need to put forth a vision for Louisiana. And so transit was, it's something that people don't really like. Generally, your average Louisiana doesn't put it on the forefront of priorities or concerns or issues. But when you sit down and talk to people, whether they're in Bunkie or in Bossier, like transit comes up. And so people needed a vision, and we were all curious about, we being, different volunteers in Sierra Club, but then also other organizations and other climate groups were like, why don't we put forth what we want to see 10 years from now in Louisiana? And then the Transit Equity Group essentially committed to a statewide transit network. So we want to see local and regional connectivity of multimodal transit. So whether it's bus or biking or walking safely or trains, we want to connect all of Louisiana over the next decade. And so our group kind of set out on advocating around Build Back Better. Build Back Better didn't happen, but bipartisan infrastructure framework did. And so then it's like, okay, what from bipartisan infrastructure framework monies can we put towards our ultimate goal? And then now the governor's budget, what can be the ultimate goal for public transportation that's realistic within the next couple of years that puts us on track to connect all of the state in the next 10 years? And 10 became the number because at the time, we were really, and still are, bought into making sure that we don't get past that 2 degrees number, that 1.5 degrees Celsius actually, that the United Nations warns against when it comes to the global warming or climate change across both the world. And so instead of purely talking about climate and carbon emissions, it's like, okay, how can we be innovative and fresh and exciting for people of all ages that have different needs whether they need to get their groceries or their prescriptions or get to their kids or they're too young to drive? Can we have a transit system that meets the needs of every Louisianan and it's ubiquitous enough that there's no second thought to it. It's second nature to just hop on a bus or hop on a train to where you need to go versus cars.
Yeah, I call myself a public transportation advocate. I stay here in the Atlanta area. I've rode MARTA. I've rode the train. I've rode public transportation and on vacation. I was in the military. I was able to, be in and go to Korea, Greece, Italy, all over the world and try their public transportation. And I've always thought to myself, how can someone go somewhere else in the Northeast or somewhere that has great public transportation and then come home and think the way that we do it down here in the South is okay? I mean, and when I talk to people on a personal level, they're okay with it. But then I say, well, yeah, how about, me and you, let's go ride on the train together or bus. And they look at me as if I had just asked them to, let's jump off a cliff together. How explaining what your group is trying to do to the average Joe, how has that interaction been for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very honest about it. And John, this, like we have decided to be the 20 to 40 people in Louisiana that are willing to go down the rabbit hole so that hopefully once we figure out what all these documents and hearings and commissions and administrations and authorities that all decide transit or transportation, because we don't really have transit in Louisiana, but decide transportation, if we can figure out how they tick, we're working to, and I'm taking from Kim now, demystify the process. And so we're not fully at the place where we're like, okay, you're asking specifically for this. We know we want a statewide transit network, but you do have to go through all of the nooks and crannies to figure out who actually pulls the levers and makes the decisions. And even when you think you're talking to the right person, they're like, oh yeah, you tell me when you figure out the person that makes the decision. And so we do know we're doing that difficult thing. But for now, when it comes to the public transportation that does exist and the public transit that exists in Louisiana, the response is honestly, it's not all or nothing. Like you may be intimidated by the idea, because I ride, so half of my time is in Baton Rouge and half of my time is in New Orleans, because that's where I go to school and work is in New Orleans. And I do not ride RTA every day. I'm trying to get to that point where I can like plan my day accordingly, but I just started riding it. Like you don't need to ride anything or commit to any form of transit 100% all the time, but try it and see how it can fit into your life incrementally. And I think my friend Robert was really good at educating, because he's like our data scientist for this project, who's developing the model for the transit network statewide and then locally across the state. And it's really about, okay, you might not be able to ride the bus every day to go to work, but like, what about to go get groceries? And then a good thing about New Orleans is it's pretty walkable. So I live in Gentilly. I can walk to the grocery store. I can bike to the grocery store, just thinking through how much you really don't have to use your car in certain places. And if you don't, then what's a good alternative? And then just building that into your life. Also, gas is expensive. Car ownership in Louisiana is expensive. Car insurance in Louisiana is expensive. And so like giving people alternatives and juxtaposing that with this, John and I talk about this all the time, that $14 billion backlog of projects for DOTD, it's not going to be solved by $1 billion. And so like, obviously there's some projects that need to happen that are not going to. And so we do need alternatives that are sustainable in Louisiana, not just because of climate, but because it's really expensive here. Not everyone has access to it, but if we can create a transit system that everybody has access to, then we're doing the real job of serving the public good.
Yeah. One of the, I'm glad you brought that up about the cost of owning a vehicle. The cost of owning a vehicle, and we really don't think about this. The cost of if a person has a car, and man, I wish you would have seen this car, y'all. It literally was being held together by bungee cords. And then I wasn't able to take a picture of that one, but I think John saw the one I was able to take a picture of and put it on Facebook. The car didn't have the back window was gone, the side windows was gone. And to me, that shows me that person cannot afford to have a vehicle. Now, I'm not saying that person it shouldn't own a vehicle. I'm just saying that they have gotten to the point that they probably spend more money keeping that vehicle afloat than they do on just surviving food, shelter, clothing, right? They're spending majority of their paycheck on transportation. And that right there is a recipe for failure. And we are putting people in that recipe all the time. We are feeding them this with unreliable public transportation. And that's why I'm so happy you brought up that thing about the car and how expensive it is. Now, can you tell me what is your vision of Louisiana? Where do you see Louisiana going in the near future and in the far-fetched future?
Yeah, so like honestly, when we talk about the statewide network, immediately I think folks think trains inherently, but for us, we've really been trying to emphasize the need to maximize things as they are. So first things first, a Louisiana in the future, if we do this thing right, we can be innovative and fresh and attractive for young folks, but then also for older people. I mean, we have tons of people in our lives, right, that are moving away to go be with their kids or grandparents. Grandkids. So we want the opportunity for that to be the reverse, where families can move back in a state that is sustainable, both climate-wise, but also economically, because that's first and foremost for anybody, is being able to take care of their families. And then also a future Louisiana is well connected. And our theme is not just around physical and like literal connection, but actually emotionally supporting and reinstituting community. For so long, there's been this push for the sprawl and the movement out of the city and the suburb. And we're finding more and more people are coming back to the cities, especially during COVID. The big things of COVID, people were divorcing, they were moving back to the city, and they were quitting their jobs. So we need to be able to provide them with a new life and a new vision and opportunities, and transit's a part of that, because we shouldn't be so car reliant. That's another thing about a future Louisiana is less car reliant, but options and freedom. And like there is freedom in choice. And so people should be able to walk out of their homes and be able to hop and choose to hop on a bus or on the trolley or a light rail system or go further away to a job opportunity. And so we want to really lean into Louisiana's culture of connectedness and family and festivals and all of these things that matter to us, but then also make day-to-day realistic, because it can't just be about that train that's taking you to a Saints game. It's got to be something that you can really feel tangibly on a daily basis. It's also about maintenance. So we already have a ton of highways, roads, and bridges that we don't take care of. And let's prioritize what we have, stop building out more highways because we can't afford it and we never will. And it's getting more expensive to do that anyway. And also, how can we connect systems that already exist? We have on-demand systems that are getting people their prescriptions or taking, elderly to the pharmacy or the grocery store. But how can we build that in with Uber and Lyft? And then also, to take care of that final mile if you're hopping off of a bus and don't necessarily want to walk at nighttime, how can we get like Uber and Lyft tap in so we don't destroy that economy, but we get all of them talking to each other? And then beyond that, how do we make sure our workers' standards are equitable and it's good union jobs that we're investing in that are long term, not just for construction, and that we're beefing up transit systems, operations, and services to help with that financial match? Because for a lot of folks who don't know, with a lot of these mega projects, and then particularly with transit, the federal government wants the local and state to have a financial match. So why are we not maximizing funds from federal funding because transit services have suffered, or from the bipartisan infrastructure framework money? How can we get that to match with federal competitive grants so we can have these really incredible badass systems instead of just like, oh, we're going to expand I-10 and build another bridge and traffic's going to be just as horrible as it was before. So yeah.
And I love that. I love that. And I believe that for, I know you said that it has to be sustainable. We have to be able to maintain it. But I also want to think about, right now, and we talk about this Four Corners coalition, right? And that's kind of how Louisiana is built up. It's built up in corners, right? You have New Orleans, Baton Rouge, you have Lake Charles, Lafayette, you have Alexandria, Shreveport, and then Monroe all over there by themselves, right? But we're built in this almost four corners. We have this kind of meaty middle that we not really talk about. What transportation options do we foresee us in the future helping in the rural areas of Louisiana?
Yeah, so we've actually been doing, like, there's some international talks, and this is how, like, in the weeds you kind of end up getting, but there's a lot of international talks around helping rural areas. And so across the world, and particularly in Europe, and people hate using them as an example, but I don't know why, we are European roots state. And so we need to kind of go back to those French roots and like look at what those folks are doing now. And Paris and its surrounding rural areas are doing some incredible stuff around transit. And so some of that is like what I said, that last mile, Uber and Lyft. And then some of the rural areas are building their economy around active transport. So biking, walking, and then prioritizing that over vehicles. But as far as, getting people out of rural areas, not permanently, but just if they need to travel, obviously, you can pool, not just carpool, but like pool together the neighborhoods, get an understanding of the patterns and the needs on a daily basis, have some on-demand transit, so like direct bus system that specifically goes to Alexandria or specifically goes to Crowley, and then gets folks at like a meeting spot to tap into the larger transit systems, depending on where they're going or jobs that are available in the region. But we do have to think about a lot of economies. There's a couple of parishes, right, that we're worried about financially, like Ouachita is a good example of revitalizing their economies. And so we do believe transit can help with that as well, so that folks can maintain their way of life, but then also be brought into a new innovative future and not forgotten by the rest of the state. So it's going to require a bunch of different agencies working together, whether it's DOTD, whether it's planning commissions, whether it's the legislature. They've all got to start, and we're hoping to do that, is put them in a room together, get them talking to each other, and really decide on a long range plan, not just like a buffet of ideas. We need an actual plan for how to save some part of the state's economies that were so heavy on industry that have picked up and left. So how do we make sure that our transportation isn't centering those industries, but centering people and where they need to go?